Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to possibly the peak of hard mode, possibly the entire game.
It's just a house.
I can't think of anything that's better than Hell House.
I laughed out loud when I saw this.
I mean, it's really funny. It's really inventive. It's a charming little cottage, but oh wait, it does want to murder you. I mean, in a world of bizarre concepts, someone filling a house with a mech, like a war machine, is great. Hard mode has a small problem with surprises.
Mm-hmm.
As the game wears on, a lot of the surprising elements feel unfair. This might be the last great surprise hard mode has to offer.
Oh.
Yeah, when these tonberries rolled out...
Well, that says it all.
Yeah, when these tonberries rolled out, I had angry words to say. I used some strong adult language, but I was also wearing a smile.
Yeah.
Because I knew that it was something that I could handle, and you can see that that sort of became the first check in this battle. How quickly can you defeat these tonberries?
Mm-hmm. And this was not what I would call an easy or simple fight before hard mode. And then immediately when the house shows up, it's like, oh, we have new guests.
Yeah, I believe that they are the only enemy in the game that they gave an instant death attack to. There's an entire status ailment that, as far as I'm aware, only tonberries have.
This fight here is so funny and complicated and showy that it really got me re-engaged with the combat aspects of the game. Mm-hmm. I had kind of been half paying attention to fights and just paying attention to boss fights when you were playing this before, because I was mostly paying attention for the story because, you know, I liked Advent Children and the writing for this game is really good. But this ridiculous thing that happened pulled me back into wanting to watch this fight. It's just so complex. There's a lot going on.
In the presentation, I'm just gonna keep heaping praise on this battle for most of it.
Mm-hmm.
The presentation is probably the strongest in the game, maybe just for the fact that the narrators, or the commentators, they have a dynamic commentary. They will describe what's actually happening. They had to record dozens of lines to cover enough situations, but they did it. They did do that.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever decided to just... It's like a rocket-powered mecha cuckoo clock?
Yeah. I'm sorry, you're taking damage, but I can't help but just giggle. Like, this is such a joyful fight. I can't think of any other fight, including the final boss, that I like to watch as much.
Yeah, it's such a complicated idea what happens in this battle. I wish that hard mode didn't detract from the enjoyment of it as much as it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the way that this enemy is supposed to work, you're supposed to weather its pretty strong general attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Chair salvo, house call, all of that. Whenever it uses an elemental attack, you can see that its windows will get all fired up or frosted over, I suppose. They adopt an elemental color.
Yeah.
And a set of particle effects. You are then supposed to counter with the opposing element.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is that once it starts engaging Godhouse mode, once it starts engaging Godhouse mode, the window becomes really narrow, and you have to have all of these different elements intersecting. You need to be able to issue a command to the appropriate character, and the house has to be an appropriate distance away in some situations. It's a lot to ask, and the window is really small. I think in hard mode, it's a little too much to ask. By the end, I just sort of brute force my way through it. I am quite happy with how this battle ends, though, so I guess I can't complain too much.
Is this another battle that is difficult to plan for when it comes to setting up your materia?
Oh, good lord, yes. I think it might be the point of having all of the different enemy types along the highway. It prepares you for having all 4 elements equipped.
Well, that's actually very clever and good.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me, it's a more compact version of the training that the game seems to be doing for the final boss with the whispers.
Yeah.
Available only while supplies last. Black bag.
One more shot. That's it.
Surprises in store tonight.
Yes, I would put this boss right alongside Scorpion Sentinel. Or they are leading the pack in my mind for best boss in game. Because I feel like they strike a pretty good balance of spectacle to mechanical challenge, right?
Yeah, and this game makes itself a lot about spectacle.
It's also worth pointing out, I think, that there are only 2 participants on the field. it's like this running theme. It's interesting, this recurring element where the best boss battles are the ones that only have 2 characters. Peculiar, interesting. I wonder if maybe there's anything to learn from that.
Because there's so much going on in this fight, do you feel like it would have been helpful or hurtful to have a third party member?
Hurtful. There's no way that a third party member would help in this battle as it is. Most of this boss's strongest attacks, it's throwing its body weight around, and it's just too big. I feel like if they wanted to include a third party member, they would have had to have made the house much, much smaller.
Yeah.
And it would lose a lot of the presence that it has. There's actually, I think I have footage of it, which we can just include anywhere in here. Bale, if you wouldn't mind. This was sort of the first stumbling block in hard mode for me.
Yeah.
Because of that self-imposed do every fight without anyone getting KO'd rule. This is the first time any encounter that wasn't a bike minigame
Yeah.
made me restart more than, say, 2 times.
Wow.
And the Tonberries, initially, that was one reason. A lot of it had to do with the AI. There was a situation where it was using its hospitality attack. It opens its door and draws a character in. I was controlling Cloud. He would have been slain. He would have been knocked out if I had allowed him to fall victim to the house's hospitality. So I switched to Aerith and started having her run the opposite direction of where I knew Cloud was. Then the AI ran in front of the house.
And then got sucked.
Yeah, instead of Aerith. And that was really frustrating because I feel like I did the right thing. The house was locked on to me, but there was no physical way, because Cloud was so much closer to the house, it was physically impossible for Aerith to run far enough away fast enough to keep it from pulling Cloud in instead.
Yeah, and
with the way that the AI moved.
And there's really no way to tell the AI, hey, while I'm out, please don't run at the enemy.
I suppose if I had been slightly more quick-witted, this is all an exchange that happened over 2 seconds, you know?
Yeah.
So I would have had to have been really, really smart and fast. I suppose I could have switched to Aerith to get it to lock onto her, and then once the attack was initiated, I could have switched back to Cloud to guide him to safety. But that's a pretty big ask, and I feel like that's asking too much of the player, asking them to sort of paper over an underdeveloped system. The party management tools are almost non-existent.
should make you stronger.
What's this? The old switcheroo? As usual,
This one's for you.
House is up.
Get him!
We're moving towards the conclusion of this battle. I have mixed feelings. It's around this time where I kind of stopped caring so much about getting a dramatic finish for each of these battles. And it's because I can't. Well, you know, we're not quite there yet. I'm gonna save it for a second. One interesting thing that happens here is after I summon Leviathan, additional enemies are added to the field. At the time, that made me pretty angry. I felt like it was an unnecessary sort of slap in the face.
Yeah.
I have to assume that it coincided with the summon. They only added them because I summoned Leviathan. But since then, I've actually softened on the subject because I think it might have been a kindness. Because Godhouse mode, at least when you're playing as Cloud, it makes it really hard for him to gain ATB because his attacks rebound off of Hellhouse. So by adding additional enemies here, it gives Cloud an easy target to attack to gain ATB.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, maybe that was the designer's intention. I'm not certain. I should start talking about the conclusion now. I think we're getting close enough. This is actually a great example of how difficult it can be to get things lined up whenever you're dealing with summons.
Yeah.
Yeah, knowing when to deploy a summon so it can defeat a boss for you very, very cinematically. It's a weird guessing game. And I'm happy to say that in this battle, I managed to delay just long enough, and Hellhouse has just the right level of HP that I defeat the house with its mortal nemesis, flooding. I can't imagine a more appropriate way to beat Hellhouse, and I'm sad to say that it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
This is probably, in my mind, the most egregious example of Cloud's kill-stealing bullshit.
Yeah.
He does it a few times throughout the game, but this one felt like a personal affront.
Yeah, because you bother to set up that summon and wait, and then it just shows you, after the boss is defeated, it shows Cloud flipping on there and sticking it with the sword.
Oh, woo, he hit it with a sword. I guess we'll just ignore the water dragon.
Yeah.
But that's small potatoes in the grand scheme of all of this, you know?
I mean, they do that with a lot of the bosses, though, so they don't really reward you for being stylish. They just kind of paper over whatever struggles might have happened to get to the point, and then allow you to always have a flashy finish.
Yeah, it sort of makes me wonder, does that demonstrate a lack of faith in the player or in the system? Or maybe they just had too many competing elements. Maybe they just had too many designers fighting for this presentation first or mechanics first style of development, you know? Just because Hellhouse was defeated doesn't mean that we were done with the arena. Chapter 9, as previously established, possibly the best chapter in the game. It's a bit of a shame because I think that the designers knew it.
Yeah.
The designers keep funneling you back to Chapter 9 once you've unlocked Chapter Select. It kind of starts to lose its luster after you've done it twice.
Yeah.
After you've done it 3 times. You remember the manuscripts that you were rewarded throughout hard mode?
Yeah.
What they've done, they've locked manuscripts down 2 mutually exclusive paths in hard mode. There are 2 sets of side quests in this chapter. There are a couple that you can receive from Chocobo Sam, and there are a couple that you can receive from Madam M. You can't do all of them in one go through the chapter.
Oh.
Chapter 9 is also the culmination of the Pretty Dresses quest.
Yeah.
sort of, not quest, sort of like almost metagame activity, I suppose. You have to have a lot of will and knowledge outside of what's happening in the story to care about all of the pretty dresses, I think. But this is where you see the effects of all of those choices. If you mess anything up, like I did one too many quests for Aerith's chapter, which determines the dress she wears.
Yeah.
So I wound up having to do this whole chapter, I think on normal mode, an extra time. It was actually the last thing I did in the entire game.
Oh.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. Getting all of the dressies, harder than hard mode. I had to do the whole 9th chapter again, just to get Aerith's last dress, because I made a little mistake. I did one quest too many. So that's what you see here. I no longer remember which quest applies to which city council member.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. The point is that I've lined all of them up for you to observe and enjoy. Right here might actually be my favorite. It is another classic Final Fantasy enemy, like the Tonberries, here to be battled in glorious 2020 HD.
Be battled in a perfect arena.
The inclusion of various old school Final Fantasy enemies, a lot of older elements they have recycled. Sometimes it feels like they're almost embarrassed by them.
Yeah?
Yeah. A lot of the classic Final Fantasy enemies are the purview of side quests, optional content, you know? There's a Malboro in this game. They're shunted into side content, optional quests, the VR arena towards the end of hard mode. Another example, it's the inconsistent handling of the victory theme.
Yeah.
Because this is an action title, I understand that they didn't want to da-da-da-da after every battle, but they do use it in the arena, and I think that's a pretty good place to fit it. But sometimes when Barrett will sing it out,
yeah,
whenever Barrett cuts loose with the victory theme, I don't know how to feel about it. It's almost like they're saying that the trappings of the series, they're not serious enough for the game proper.
Yeah.
It has to be held separate. It has to be held at arm's length, you know?
Do you think that that is a positive or negative aspect of this?
Oh, negative, yeah. I feel like a lot of more modern, I say more modern, but as far back as Final Fantasy 13, I feel like a lot of Final Fantasy design is informed by what I would describe as embarrassment. That probably isn't fair. I don't know any of the designers personally, you know. I don't even bother to look up interviews that they've given. So I'll change it and I'll say this desire to escape Final Fantasy as a property. I would say that actually seemingly informed the original Final Fantasy VII. I do feel like quite a lot of Final Fantasy development is trying to escape its past, trying to innovate, often just for the sake of it. And the reason why that bothers me, it's not that I don't want something new. It's not that I don't want to see that innovation. It's just irksome that they refuse to let go of the brand.
Yeah.
It's interesting to consider, would Final Fantasy VII have performed as well as it did if it wasn't called Final Fantasy VII? What if it had just been some new property? And with this, I'm pretty sure that these jerks have been in the game more than Sephiroth. I don't think that holds true, but it's close. It's basically neck and neck. The principal antagonist of Remake, is it Sephiroth? Possibly. Is it, I don't know, President Shinra? Maybe. It's probably Beck and his badasses. Just based in volume, you know?
Well, this is the third time they're back, so I think that in the contest of who is Cloud's rival, the third time's the charm.
It's right here. It was there the whole time.
Yeah. Not my favorite pairing, but I mean, they did it.
Yeah, I mean, just by right of rule of threes, they have to be Cloud's ultimate rival. And you know, I think you can actually fight them on demand, if I'm remembering correctly, later in the game, once the plate falls. I think you can come back here and they just wander around essentially as normal enemies.
Yeah.
And you can beat them up. They survive inexplicably. You know what it must be? They must have like 40,000 HP, but they're just huge wieners. So after taking a couple thousand damage, they give up, you know?
And do their poses, their floor poses.
Right.
They do their floor stretches.
Yeah, they just do some yoga.
Do they feel as silly to you as they feel to me having fought them?
I have to take them seriously because they have the ability to stun party members with their landmines. Mm-hmm. Sorry to take a hard right turn there, but yeah, I have to. They are not nearly so goofy in actual gameplay. Mm-hmm. I feel like I did a disservice to anybody that was watching before. I was so preoccupied talking about the minigames in general and cracking jokes that I forgot to give any helpful advice. I'm going to try to rectify that moving forward. We're about to do the squats minigame. I find it incredibly helpful to go into the options menu and turn the music volume and the speech volume almost all the way down. Mm-hmm. The squats minigame, as we're about to see, it's kind of a rhythm game, but the rhythm is dynamic. It changes as you play. Generally, the better you're doing, you have to progressively increase the speed at which you're pressing the buttons.
Mm-hmm. So then the music and the dialogue becomes a big distraction, especially if you're used to playing rhythm games.
Oh, nothing is in time.
This is so serious. I remember playing the original, and I did get to this part, and I remember how serious it was then.
Yeah.
And I believe that everyone's facial expressions are appropriate here. You're doing really well.
Thank you. I think a lot of it has to do with turning all of the distractions down, because I tried just muting it, but the beat that they give you whenever you have successfully pressed a button is very helpful. Mm-hmm. So just muting it, all the information I had to go on was Cloud's animation, because that's another technique that I think is probably more important for the second version of this minigame whenever you are playing as Tifa.
Yeah.
You can watch the animation, and whenever there's a hitch, you can press the button right after that. And once you get into the rhythm, if you're constantly just increasing your speed to try to reduce the number of, reduce the amount of time that your character is frozen in a pose,
yeah,
that is another way to succeed at this minigame. But I found that just keeping the sound effects on and just listening for the feedback, well, I think that the results are self-evident. One thing that I did, though, is I further refined the process here. I turned the vibration off, because the reason why I screwed up and fell over towards the end of the last trial, it's because the controller vibration also doesn't quite feel like it's in sync. The controller is just going crazy by the time you get up to near max speed, you know?
Yeah.
And it also becomes unhelpful. So by turning that off, I think I get like a solid 10-point lead on the hardest difficulty they have for this minigame, you know?
I really like Cloud's animation for these, especially when you get going kind of quickly, because as you were saying, there is a hitch in the animation that leads you to feel prompted to press a button. But I also think that it's funny from a story perspective from when it's Cloud, not when it's Tifa, but when it's Cloud, because of his soldier backstory, it makes him seem like an incredible robot next to all of these really swole, practiced athletes, you know? And he just rolls in there all skinny mini, and like the leader of this gym is falling over on his buns.
These minigames, I actually found them a little, not bike minigame frustrating, but more than darts frustrating on normal mode, because they don't always, it's not a target number that you're trying to beat. There's some process where they roll a random value.
Oh.
Yeah, because there was a really frustrating point on normal mode where I got the same pull-up score as Tifa twice in a row, and I won one and lost the other just because Jules...
did less well one time.
Right.
But those who crave my favor
And now
must
finally
first
we have
prove that
arrived
they
at the
know it.
promised land. This is the part of the game that when I saw someone else play it, I realized that's the Final Fantasy VII that I want to play.
Yeah, this is where the excess gets truly excessive.
Oh, hold on. This is probably my favorite animation in games. That shrug is perfect. It wordlessly tells you everything you need to know about Cloud in this moment.
Yeah, look at that face.
So you say that this part is excessive. Visually, sure, yes, but also just with regards to the development. Where else are they supposed to use Cloud's J-pop dance routine in this game? I don't think that this mirrors anything in the original. And whenever I saw this, again, it won't stop happening. I'm about to say something that sounds like a goof, and it's just the world we live in. This is the scene that I realized there's room to create art in this space. This is not just a bunch of sad, overworked developers that are just having to churn out a prettier version of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, this is splendid.
They might still be sad, they might still be overworked, but at the very least, I don't think that in a decade, those people are gonna look back and say, I could have been more creatively fulfilled doing any other thing, you know?
Yeah.
Whoever participated in the production of Cloud's erotic dance routine, be proud.
Well, and it's like really, the choreography is really fun and good.
Yeah, I think this might be one of the more dynamic, interesting things that Square Enix has just ever shot.
Yeah.
The camera work is pretty good, I think. I don't look at a lot of content like this, like a lot of dance numbers, but you can read what's going on. It's exciting.
Yeah.
I like the one where Cloud and Andrea have their backs to the camera and have their arms held parallel to the ground and they're looking over their shoulders. So mysterious.
Yeah. I'm partial to the more difficult stuff.
Such as?
Like the part where they do all of those different hand angles and like the hand and neck gestures are difficult to get right and precise.
I don't actually appreciate that part of J-pop dance. I care more about the larger silhouette. They're much more appropriate for the dynamic of presenting on a stage.
Maybe.
Of stadium seating.
Maybe, but the cool thing about this choreography is that it has both.
Oh, here's an important tip. This minigame is pretty simplistic. Actually, they're like pressing the button prompts when they appear. The only real advice I have to give is that it's better to be late pressing a button than early. Because once it collides with the icon, you have a fair amount of time after that to press. I recorded this one twice, and I had one take where I had two faults, but they were both good. I had another take with only one fault, and it was a bad. The crowd actually stops cheering if you get any bads.
Oh.
I decided that having two minor faults was better than one major fault. This is what you get. It's another B+. If I remember correctly, there's still a little bit of Chapter 9 left, but that's most of it. That's the bulk of Final Fantasy VII Remake's most fiendish, excessive, beautiful chapter. I think it might be worth playing the entire game just for this part. So, in conclusion, Final Fantasy VII Remake, come for the hot-ass dancing, stay for the, I don't know, sweeping RPG narrative, plethora of sword boys. What's true? What's in my heart?
You come for the hot ass dancing and you stay for the
Aerith saying shit, mainly.
come for the hot ass dancing, be pleasantly surprised by the writing.
It's not exactly snappy, but I think it's accurate. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The writing's really good. It's just a dance. Just a hot ass dance. 2 dudes and some bees.
And some bees.